Hello, once more from Newsweek headquarters at the top of the World Trade Center in New York City, home of the champion, well, not quite champion, but soon to be champion, hopefully, New York Knicks. I am Carlo and this is the 1600.
This country was stone cold dead.
You know, I keep mentioning the Knicks because every time I do on the show, they beat their opponent by 40 points in the next playoff game. So we're going to keep on rooting for the Knicks here on the 1600, regardless of what anybody else has to say about it, because they're going all the way this year. Okay, guys, we're fully in midterm primary season, believe it or not. And rather than sort of listen to me blab on about the various races of importance and the margins that the Democrats could win or lose by in November, I wanted to hear from some of the actual candidates running for Congress. I know that might seem like a novel idea here in the news media, but it's nice to hear from the horse's mouth. And my guest today is one such candidate. Saikat Chakrabarti is running as a progressive in California's 11th district, which of course represents the great city of San Francisco. This is a seat that has been held by Nancy Pelosi for almost 40 years. Pelosi is retiring at the end of her current term, which of course puts this critical seat up for grabs without an incumbent. Saikat, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate your time. So this is a crowded field that you're running in, but you are one of the top three candidates according to polling. The top two vote getters are in the June 2nd primary. Will of course move on to the general in November. So I want to hear a little bit about your story, Saikat, because you're kind of an interesting candidate. You're contradictory in a lot of ways. A millionaire tech bro, sort of running as a democratic socialist, a software engineer by trade. You've never held office before, but you're not a political neophyte by any stretch. You worked for both AOC and Bernie Sanders, and you've now put in almost $5 million of your own money into this race. So tell us a little bit about your story and why you decided to jump into this race even before Pelosi formally retired.
Yeah, I came out to San Francisco back in 2009, and when I first came out here, I worked in the tech industry for a few years, and I ended up joining the startup as an early engineer. And that was actually kind of an eye-opening experience because I was in the right place at the right time, I ended up making a lot of money. And, I don't come from money. I grew up middle class, going to public schools. Sure. My parents were refugees during partition in India, so they grew up in poverty. And, at the same time I went through that I was living in the mission. Like, my neighbors were getting evicted on a daily basis, right? And it's just, I think, this crazy economy we have where, I worked hard for a few years at Stripe, but I didn't work harder than a teacher or a nurse or the people cleaning our offices did every single day. And yet we have an economy where those folks, my neighbors who are living right next to me, they're never going to be able to afford a home in San Francisco. They're never going to be able to afford a secure retirement. And I see this as an existential problem for the country, where if you can't have an economy where 40 hours of honest work a week lets you have an affordable life, a dignified life, then we are a broken system. So that's why I frankly quit. And I started looking around. I wasn't political at the time. I wanted to work on those issues. And at the time, Bernie Sanders was talking about it. So I went and joined the Bernie campaign in 2016. And then after that, through that whole experience, I sort of saw a Democratic Party that fought tooth and nail to keep a corporate status quo intact. I realized it's not enough to fight the Republicans. We actually have to change the Democratic Party as well. So I started an organization called Justice Democrats to recruit working class people to run, not just against Republicans, but to primary corporate Democrats as well. That was a very controversial idea back in 2018.
Sure.
But, through that project, we ended up recruiting a bunch of amazing candidates, people like Cori Bush, also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And then when it was clear we were going to lose all our races, we threw a Hail Mary. I moved to New York, where you are now, and ran AOC's race in 2018. And then when she won, I went to D.C. as her first chief of staff, and I led the work on the Green New Deal. And, the reason I'm running now is I've been a part of a bunch of these insurgent campaigns, these moments that seem so hopeful, that feel like real change is possible. And right now, I haven't seen a moment of change, anything like this in my entire career. I mean, things are bad right now with Trump, but at the same time, the candidates running across the country are amazing. And they actually, I'm reaching out to them, try to organize a movement of us who are going to go to D.C. and completely turn things around. At the same time, the movements on the outside are way bigger than anything I've ever seen. We're seeing at the No Kings rallies. We're seeing at the anti-ICE protests. So I really see this election and the next one as kind of being like our New Deal moment. Like, there's a real chance to turn the whole country around. But to do that, we have to break the corporate stranglehold of money in our politics. We have to completely change Democratic Party leadership. And, I think that's possible. So I'm going in there to try to take that shot.
Well, look, I think there's something to that. I mean, I don't just say this like lightly, but it does feel like there's something in the air in this sort of election cycle, on both sides, but particularly on the Democratic side. And I want to talk to you about the diagnosis that you have for what's wrong with the Democratic Party, which of course we could spend hours on just that question. But before we get there, I want to sort of focus a little bit more on your background. So you really, I mean, I think you're not doing yourself justice, to use the actual word. You were responsible, not single-handedly, but you were very much part of the party responsible for bringing AOC into Congress by virtue of your work co-founding Justice Democrats. So I don't think it's unfair to say that you sort of helped build the quote-unquote squad model, right? Recruit outsiders, primary establishment Democrats, change the caucus from within. Do you think that's fair? And how do you think that model has held up since you really got going back in, I guess, almost 10 years ago yet now, right?
Yeah, I was a key part of that, but I always want to say, like, it was a team effort, right?
Sure.
It wasn't me alone. And I never want to take anything away from the actual candidates.
No, of course, it's
who
the
had the courage
candidates.
to do it, right? But I've always been someone who comes at this from a systems perspective of, like, how do you actually build the infrastructure to make this stuff happen? Because it is impossible for any individual member of Congress to go in there and change everything by themselves. I mean, I saw AOC put up a hell of a fight, especially in that first year. And she did, by willing to go in there and risk her long-term political career. Because that's what she was doing with the Green New Deal. Like, we went in there in 2019 at a time when Democrats didn't want to do anything on climate change. And with the Green New Deal, we were saying we got to go way bigger on climate, and we have to actually use climate to build up high-wage jobs for working people, reverse decades of economic stagnation, the reason why we're in the mess we're in today. But AOC actually introduced it by joining Sunrise Movement for this sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office on her first day in D.C., right? Like, imagine doing a sit-in in your boss's office on your first day at work. That's what she was doing. But because she had the guts to do that, that blew up the Green New Deal in the media, and then, through inside-outside organizing, where I was on the inside pushing ideas like industrial policy and public financing, while Sunrise was showing up to these presidential town halls demanding a response to Green New Deal. We got everybody running for president to run on their own ambitious climate plans that talked about it as a way to build up high-wage jobs, including Biden. He ended up running on Build Back Better. That eventually became the Inflation Reduction Act, and that passed. It created the largest investment in climate and union jobs in history. So, I really got this view, and this informs all my politics, of how, even one member of Congress with some guts working with outside movements can change what's possible in D.C. But if we have a movement of candidates like that, working with a much larger movement on the outside, I think we can do that sort of structural change at an economy-wide scale. But it is about the infrastructure. That's always been my view. And that's what I've been trying to do in this campaign, too. I just did a rally last Thursday with Hasan Piker, but also progressive candidates running around the country who are primarying incumbent Democrats right now. And we tried to use the rally to raise money for them, because it's going to take a team of us in there to actually make this sort of change happen.
I watched some of that rally on YouTube, and it was, you could certainly tell the energy in that room. It sort of felt a little bit like, Obama-esque from the 07, 08 days. Back to AOC just for a minute, because, again, you were there with her at the beginning. Why hasn't she endorsed you yet? Are you too progressive for the most progressive member of the House?
No, I don't think it's that. I've been in touch with her over the years. We're on good terms, but she makes endorsement decisions on her time. I don't think anyone's entitled to an endorsement, so of course I hope to earn it. I still have a lot of respect for everything she's doing, but yeah, I'm not. I don't know exactly how she's thinking through her endorsement decisions these days.
Sure. Well, so the New York Post, and take this with a grain of salt, of course, they're suggesting that there was a falling out between you two. What's your response to that?
No, there's no falling out. I mean, I had a baby on the way back in 2019, and so I planned my transition out. I've trained up my successor. And at the same time, I also, like, that whole sort of diagnosis I gave of how it is hard for one member of Congress to change everything. That's what I felt then, too. I felt like AOC was doing everything she possibly could as an individual member of Congress. And I thought I could have more of an impact supporting her by going back on the outside, trying to, support other progressive challenges around the country, but also working on the ideas. So that's really what I've been doing for the last 5 years, or 6, I guess longer than 5 years now, is I've been running a think tank called New Consensus, where we've been really doing a much more detailed, comprehensive plan for how exactly do you build a clean economy that creates prosperity for all, reverses, decades of money just going to the richest people in our country. We call it our version of our Project 2025, but in reverse, because it really is like a detailed plan of what do you do starting on day one. But yeah, she and I are on good terms.
I will move on from AOC. I promise I don't want to just ask you AOC-related questions. But she's been in the news a little bit this week. I mean, she's in the news all the time, mostly because, conservatives love to hate her. They think that she's like the devil incarnate, even though, she started much more as a sort of like flamethrower than she actually has been. I mean, she's sort of moved towards the center a little bit in her governing philosophy. I think she doesn't rock the boat as much as she used to. I'm not saying that's good or bad. She's obviously a very savvy politician. But what I wanted to ask you is, she has this quote that's been going around. She was on a podcast and they were talking about billionaires and whether, billionaires can be, quote unquote good. But the quote that she has, I wanted to read to you this is AOC. Quote, "There's a certain level of wealth that's unearned. You can't earn $1 billion," end quote. That's the line that's sort of going around. Do you agree? Can $1 billion be earned in the American economy?
No, because I think it's been really interesting to see the folks attacking her for that, because it really boils down to this fundamental distinction of how people with money make money and how people with labor make money, right? You can, like, when I think of earning money, it's like you putting in effort and making money as a result of your effort. That's, putting in your labor to make money. But
right.
Billionaires, and even myself, right? Like, billionaires make money off of their investments. It's just you just make money by essentially gambling.
Capital appreciation.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, even if you look at someone like Bill Gates even, right? Like, he made way more money after he stopped working at Microsoft because he was just rich already. And so, no, I don't believe that's earning. I believe, you can make money. You can make billions of dollars off of $1 billion, but that's not earning. You're not putting effort in. You're not putting labor in. You're not putting sweat in.
Right. But, I mean, I think the other side of that argument is people like Bezos, and I hate to even sound like I'm defending these people, but people like a Bezos or a Gates, et cetera, they created they created value by virtue of the company that they created, right? I mean, how many people has Amazon or Microsoft employed over the years, right? Or I guess another sort of counter argument, although this is more of an edge case, is, what about somebody like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, or, I'm sure there's probably athletes now who are billionaires. I mean, they're billionaires because of their investments, but mostly because of their labor, no?
It's actually hard to find people who have become billionaires because entirely of their labor. You talked about, I just mentioned Bill Gates, but yeah, even with Bezos, right? It's his investments that are making him most of his money. But at the end of the day, of course, we should reward people for starting businesses and being successful entrepreneurs. But should we have a society where they get everything, right? Like, I don't think we should have this winner-take-all kind of economy, because the flip side of that is, at the same time that you have these billionaires making ungodly amounts of money, most people can't ever afford a home. Most young people coming out of college today, they're looking at a future where they might not be able to afford to raise a family, just the basics. And that, to me, is what's completely twisted. So I don't think billionaires can earn billions of dollars. It's mostly coming off of just, the appreciation of their capital. Right. But regardless, the point is, do we think the current structure of society is working? And I just think it's fundamentally broken. We have to restructure how our taxes work. Even if the billionaires were earning it, that's not a good way to set up society if most people can't afford the basics.
Well, this is going to become such a big issue in the age of AI, which you have some really interesting ideas about, and I'm going to ask you in a second. But before we get to AI, let's talk a little bit about the Democratic Party sort of writ large. I was tooling around on your website the other day. I noticed it doesn't mention Trump. It doesn't make any criticism of Trump, only of Democrats. And one of the things on that website, quoting you, Democratic Party leaders in D.C. are unfit to lead the world as it is today, end quote. I mean, first of all, I completely agree with you. I don't know how anybody couldn't. But isn't that a gift to Republicans heading into a midterm?
No, I mean, I've been hearing that argument my entire political career, right? Bernie Sanders was a gift to Republicans. Just as Democrats was a gift to Republicans. Sure. And the thing that I would say is a gift to Republicans is a Democratic Party that doesn't fight and that doesn't have a vision for the future. Because the reason we have Trump right now is that for decades, the American dream's been dying. Young people are not going to do as well as their parents. For decades, working people have been working longer hours to afford less and less. And that is why people voted for change with Barack Obama. That's also why people voted for change with Donald Trump. That's frankly why people voted for Biden as a change to Donald Trump and then Trump again.
Sure.
If we can't turn that around, then we are going to keep seeing authoritarians come to power. Because unfortunately, when the pie is shrinking, when people's lives are getting harder, that argument is more powerful. The argument that I, a strong man, will come here and fix it all for you, that works. That maybe your problems are because of undocumented people, because of trans people. If only we kick them out of society, then there'll be more for you. And of course, it's a complete
Rather
lie.
than trying to make the pie larger.
Exactly. Make it larger and make more people have it be more inclusive. So no, on my website, of course, I'm a huge opponent of everything Donald Trump is doing. I think it's disgusting, and a lot of what he's doing, I think, is the supercharging of systems that have been happening over decades. Like the war in Iran is a result of decades of us continuing to expand our military budget, continuing to expand our military interventionism all over the place. His corruption is on a completely different level, but there's been corruption in the system for a while, and that's really what I'm trying to point out. Is it's not enough to just get rid of Donald Trump. We have to actually fix the system that allowed Trump to get in there in the first place.
Right. Well, to your point, I mean, there was a poll last month. I forget where. I didn't note it. I think it was Gallup, maybe Pew. But they're all basically showing the same. Democratic Party approval rating, roughly 35, 36%. That's actually worse than Trump, right? As an institution, the Democrats are polling worse or even with an extremely popular president in Donald Trump. Why is that?
I think it's two bits. One is they are failing with their own base. They're failing to fight Trump in this moment. Every single time the Democrats get a point of leverage. I mean, I saw this a few months ago after Alex Preddy got murdered, right, in Minneapolis. The entire country was watching. Everyone so mad at ICE. And what did the Democrats do with that kind of attentional leverage in that moment? They passed a 2-week funding bill where they could have shut down DHS right then, but they passed a 2-week funding bill to kick the can down the road. And then they held the line, but it was on stuff like body cameras and stuff that won't make a difference. If instead in that moment they had really fought on clawing back the money to ICE, things that would make a real difference, I think you'd see the Democratic Party base at least supporting him. So part of it is they are showing that they don't know how to fight in this moment. But then the bigger part is they don't have a real vision for how to change the system that's screwing people over. Like, they don't have a real vision for how to end the corruption in D.C. They don't have a real vision for how to completely turn the economy around to make sure that we do make life affordable again. And unless we have that vision, then, yeah, I think the current Democratic Party is going to continue going down the tubes. And that's fundamentally where I think there's a lot of desperation there, but there's also some reason for optimism, because there are people running all over the country who want to change the party, to have a real vision, to actually use this opportunity to make life work for people.
Would you support Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker if you're elected?
No, I've been public that I wouldn't. And one of the things I'm going to work on is organizing a coalition of people that won't support him for leader, so we do get a different leader. Because right now, if you look at, I think Axios had some reporting a few months ago that something like 100 people, over 100 people running for Congress right now, off the record will say they don't support him. That to me means we need somebody going out there to organize that opposition into a real opposition, so we get somebody else. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think a lot of Democrats I just know here in New York would say that he just does not have what it takes to lead the opposition to Trump if the Democrats do win. But somebody who did have that job, Nancy Pelosi, who is retiring, as we said. Look, I mean, you could say a lot of things about Nancy Pelosi. I think one thing you have to acknowledge, though, is she was an extraordinarily effective sort of whipper of votes, right? She held that caucus together over many years. Where are you on her leadership as Speaker, and also just as the representing the 11th?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff I respect a lot about Nancy Pelosi. I mean, one of the things that people don't remember about her is even when she first went into Congress, she really took a stand on the HIV/AIDS epidemic that was killing tons of people in San Francisco. And that was an unpopular position to take. And she was strategic in actually pushing the bounds of what was politically possible in D.C., got money back into the district, and really made an impact on the epidemic. And similarly, as you said, like, she's an incredible tactician within D.C. Yeah. She's also has been good for San Francisco. She has managed to get a lot of money into the district, helped us build out the Presidio, all kinds of infrastructure. But the place where I often have disagreements with her is the strategy, the direction, where the party should go. Because I don't think it's enough right now for us to just have someone who knows how to work within the system. I think the system itself needs to change. So when I look at things like our foreign policy, we're under Democratic and Republican presidents, we have continued expanding our defense budget. I mean, right now, a few months ago, we passed $900 billion defense budget with 115 Democrats voting for it, including Nancy Pelosi. And this is at a time where only 3% of Democrats and only 16% of Republicans want a bigger defense budget. So I'd say the politicians are completely out of step with where the people are at. And it's been a huge mistake. Yeah. This has been why we've killed millions of people. It's why half the world hates us right now. We have to slash our defense budget, right? And same thing when you look at fundamentally, how do we make people's lives better? How do we make life affordable again? I'm a strong supporter of universal health care and Medicare for all, universal child care, tuition-free public colleges and trade schools. I think we have to move to public power instead of having investor-owned utilities, because that's the way to cut our utility bills. This is saying that the government should take a more direct role in directly providing these services. That's something where Nancy Pelosi has not been on the same page. And then, of course, when it comes to the corruption in D.C., I strongly believe we should ban members of Congress from trading stocks. We should ban the revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry. We have to completely end corporate money in our politics to make sure that corporations can't buy out our politicians. And, former Speaker Pelosi has not always been in support of those issues. She didn't allow us to get a vote on banning congressional stock trading. So, my differences with her are on the actual policy and the vision of where the party should go. But, of course, I acknowledge she's been an incredibly effective legislator.
All right. She hasn't endorsed in this race, at least not yet. Do you think her silence helps you or hurts you?
I don't know. I'm not sure where she's going to end up going. But the way I always look at endorsements is I'm going to run my race regardless, and anybody who agrees with what I'm trying to do and where I'm trying to go I'm happy to have your support. But yeah, I am talking about going in there and primarying other corporate Democrats, changing Democratic Party leadership. So I wouldn't be surprised if people who like the current Democratic Party are not necessarily in favor of my campaign.
Sure. Well, that sort of leads me to what I wanted to ask you about. So if you're just sort of tuning into this, you may be thinking, oh, look, this guy's a tech bro from San Francisco. Surely he's got the backing of the tech sector and these AI companies. You would be quite mistaken about that. Your opponent, Scott Wiener, has the backing, or at least appears to have the backing of some of the AI money. He's got a PAC that I believe is backed by Anthropic. At least it's been reported to be backed by Anthropic. You don't really know with this dark money. Why don't the AI guys like you?
Well, it's not just one super PAC, by the way. He's got at least 3 super PACs now that are backed. He's got one that's backed by AI money, one that's backed by a bunch of tech VCs, another one that's backed by crypto billionaires and some Trump mega donors, and also APAC board members. So there's a general, the people with capital in San Francisco generally don't like me because I am calling for a wealth tax on billionaires and centimillionaires, which, by the way, includes myself. And I'm calling for completely restructuring. People see me as a class traitor here, and I'm proud to wear that badge. That's fine. But the AI companies specifically, they don't like me because I do have a very detailed platform up on my website for how the regulations we are seeing right now are just way too small. And I think Anthropic's honestly been one of the villains in this because they are trying to pitch themselves as the good guys. The good AI company. But if you look at the regulations they're passing, it's the AI version of greenwashing. Like they're trying to they know regulations necessary because there's this huge public backlash, but they're passing basically the bare minimum so they can say, we're doing AI regulation, but it's not going to make a difference. If you look at the bill Scott Wiener worked with them on in the California state legislature, there's reporting that Anthropic lobbyists came in, worked with Scott Wiener, and they weakened the whistleblower protections to the point where it's completely out of step with any other industry. They reduced the fines for violations from $10 million per violation to $1 million, which, these AI companies spend $1 million like every 20 minutes. That's nothing to them, right? But that's enough for them to know that Scott Wiener is their guy. And I, on the other hand, am talking for essentially public control of this technology. Like, I think if we have a technology that is going to potentially wipe out half of all of our jobs, maybe wipe out humanity itself, I don't think that should be in the hands of a few CEOs to make those kinds of decisions for all of society. I think we should have labor say how AI gets introduced into a workforce. If there's all these productivity gains, that should mean shorter work weeks, higher wages for workers, not just workers getting replaced. And I call for having a publicly owned national AI labs that use the technology for the good stuff, like cancer research, drug discovery, but not for the profit-driven slop feeds. And I say, the way I think we can get there is at some point, this AI investment bubble is probably going to burst. These AI companies are going to come to a government asking for a bailout, saying we're too big to fail. And I think in that moment, we should do what we should have done in the last recession. We should, instead of bailing them out, buy them out for pennies on the dollar and convert them into publicly owned corporations where we use it for the good stuff and not for the bad.
Interesting. So would you support, putting aside the possibility and probability that this is a bubble that is going to burst essentially, would you support nationalizing any of these companies if it turns out that like we keep hearing about Anthropic and its new LLM mythos that is so powerful they can't even release it to the public? Is there an argument for nationalizing any of these companies if it turns out that they're just too powerful for their own good?
Yeah. I mean, essentially the plan I just laid out is one route to nationalizing.
Yeah.
Right. But I think if we get to a point where they're starting to just be too powerful in general, we should look into just straight up nationalizing them, taking public control. Like, we don't, if there's any other technology with that kind of risk to society, we wouldn't have that in the hands of just a few profit-driven corporations, because that's so risky. That's not how we make society-wide decisions. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me the AI lobby doesn't necessarily like that argument, and they're going to spend, as they said, whatever it takes to make sure I don't win this race. But that's what I'm up against.
I'm fascinated by this stuff because I feel like you're on the sort of bleeding edge of where the public is. I mean, you're starting to see the backlash, I think, in polling, but I hear from people all the time, readers and viewers who are just like, this is like, we don't want this. Nobody wants this, right? I mean, maybe they want the stuff that we keep being promised, like the cancer research, but nobody wants the shit, the slop, as you said, that is coming for their, and this technology that the own CEOs of these companies are saying is going to wipe out, half of white collar jobs. It's not like this is just coming from some rant. Like Dario Amodi, the head of Anthropic, says half of white collar jobs are going to be taken by this technology. But one thing that's a long way of getting to my question, which is I've been interested in this idea of a compute tax. I don't know how familiar you are, but basically the idea being that, if AI companies are going to capture all of this economic value, let's collect some of that and sort of mail it back out as either a dividend or UBI, or basically turn AI into a part of the tax base. Is that something that you are you into that?
Yeah, that's part of my plan as well. Is I call for creating a new American trust fund, essentially, but it's modeled off the Alaskan Sovereign Wealth Fund, where they do that for the oil and gas industry.
Exactly.
And I'm open to how we collect the money. I call for just a tax on the AI companies, but I could do it as a compute tax. We could do it as public equity stakes, right, where we actually take stakes in the companies, and that would also be a path towards eventual public ownership of these companies. But absolutely, we have to tax them. I mean, because a big risk in the current model is we are basically, we have a model where we tax labor and wages, right? Mm-hmm. But if AI is going the way it's going, we are going to just see further wealth consolidation, and we have to completely change our tax basis, not tax wealth or wages and labor, but instead tax wealth and capital. And so there are a bunch of ways we can do that, but we have to do that. And I think that has to happen in general in our society.
No, I completely agree with you on that. Also, you call for a jobs guarantee, I think, right? How would that work?
Yeah, so this is the other part of the equation, right, is if you take AI out of the equation of our economy, we are basically doing nothing in our economy. Like, it's basically all AI and healthcare-driven growth. And that's
the S&P 500 is like 5 stocks. It's all because of this AI capex, basically.
Yeah, and that's happening because we don't know how to do that. Like a lot of the real idea space that we're trying to open up with the Green New Deal and the work I've been doing at New Consensus has been this idea of how do countries intentionally build up the industries and the economies that they want to build. Because if you look back at our own history, at the history of basically every rich European nation, of the rich Asian nations, we all went through these phases in the 20th century where we rapidly developed our entire economies within the course of like a generation. Like, we did this during World War II when we did it to win the war, but we built up our entire industrial base. Europe did it to build up back, out of the war, and Asian countries did just like get rich in the 80s and 90s. And the way that countries do governing in those moments is completely different than what we do today. And we've been calling it mission mode, but the idea is there's usually like a movement or a leader who comes to power, really sets the country on a mission to build up whatever we need to build. And then to accomplish that, we make comprehensive plans. We don't just pass some policies and take our hands off the steering wheel. We make plans of what we want to do. And then you have institutions to finance, coordinate, and execute those plans. We used to have tons of these in America. Largest by far is one called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. We've got a big plan for how to bring that back today. But the idea all boils down to this basic premise of you have goals of what you want to do as a country, and then you use your economy to achieve those goals. And that's the the larger plans for how to do that is what I've been working on, New Consensus. So I think right now we should be building up clean high wage industries, the battery industry, solar panel industries, EV industries, right? We should be building out our public transit systems. There's all this work that we actually have to do that we are simply not doing because we don't have the institutions or the know-how for how to do it as a nation state. And so I believe we should start doing that work. And then at the same time, we should create a federal jobs guarantee so that nobody, if people do start getting fired because of these AI layoffs, they can get another job making the same amount of money doing the work that we actually need to do in this country.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that this is an underappreciated element of politics right now that not a lot of people are talking about, because if millions of white collar workers are all of a sudden given pink slips, I think people in politics, I think Washington is just completely underestimating what that's going to look like. I mean, it's going to make Occupy Wall Street look like, literally like a walk in the park, right?
Yeah.
I'm cognizant of our time, but I have a bunch of other stuff to get to. So I just want to try and stay on track here. It's my own fault for going off on an AI tangent, but it was interesting to hear your. Please go ahead.
I just want to say one other thing on the AI tangent, though.
Please.
Just something I'm not seeing reported enough. Like, the reason that there aren't that many people talking about AI, because I keep seeing this, like, this is this huge problem. Why are not that many Democratic politicians other than like Bernie and AOC and Ro Khanna talking about it? And it's because every single consultant in a congressional race will tell you, if you talk about AI, you're going to get $1 million dropped against you.
Yep.
So just don't talk about it, right? And that's why no one's talking about it. And in this race, I talked about it, I'm going to get millions of dollars dropped against me, right? But I think it's too important of a topic not to talk about, and that's why we're making a big part of our campaign.
Well, so this is a perfect segue once again to my next question, which is talking about campaign finance, right? So you've self-funded, you've put, according to the FEC records that I saw, $4.8 million of your own money into your campaign. Roughly the cost of a one-bedroom in the Presidio now, something like that, right? But you've said that there's no limit to how much you'll spend on this. You say that you want to end private money in politics entirely. How do you square that? Would you support a ban on self-funded campaigns?
I would, yeah. I mean, I would like to see us move to fully publicly financed elections.
Sure.
But, in this campaign, the other part of it is we have raised, about $400,000 from 10,000 individual donors, which is more than my opponents combined. And that's despite us not actually focusing on fundraising at all. And that's partly because, given that I do have money, I feel kind of bad asking people for money to finance my campaign. But the other piece of it is the reason it's been so much is in this race I am up against about that equivalent amount of money so far in terms of what my opponent's raising from corporations, from APAC board members, from the AI lobby, from crypto billionaires. And so to go up against that amount of money, I could either spend all my time begging those people for money, which frankly they won't give me anyway, because I'm talking about going to D.C. and completely changing the system, making sure they don't have any power, taxing their wealth. Right. Or I could put in my own money to actually run a competitive race. So I've decided to do that. So I'll be free to go to D.C. and actually change the system the way I'm talking about.
It's funny because I don't personally have a problem with self-funded campaigns. I've never really understood the backlash against them. I mean, I was honestly, when Trump ran for the first time, I remember thinking to myself, well, this guy's crazy, but it might be nice to actually see a billionaire self-fund. Of course, he didn't do that, right? He didn't, and I think you can make arguments about why it's not a good idea, why it is. But it's a millionaire self-funding their campaign, to me, is very different from taking corporate PAC money, right?
Yeah, because the problem is not the...
You're not beholden to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's two problems. One problem is that there's just so much money involved in these races right now. So the only way for me to compete against so much money coming my way is for me to put in money. And I think it does suck to have a system where a working class person wouldn't be able to do that unless they also raise tons of money. But the real problem in DC is the influence of those corporations. The reason all these corporations are donating to my opponent, it's not out of charity. It's because they know they'll have access to him and they can influence him when he's in DC. It's to buy his vote. And I saw that constantly when I was in Congress. I mean, there'd be both quid pro quo corruption, but then there's this other part which is much more nefarious, where the entire it shapes the entire world of possibility within DC. So on the quid pro quo side, we saw this really clearly when we tried to pick a fight on trying to make it so that the IRS can file your taxes for you. And Intuit, who makes TurboTax, they spend millions of dollars every campaign cycle.
Yeah,
make sure
Trump
that doesn't
killed that off. The
Trump
direct
killed,
file.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it wasn't there. Eventually, Biden did pass it, and then Trump killed it off again. But when we picked the fight, it wasn't just Republicans. It was also Democrats that came after us because they didn't want to piss off their donors. But the worst part is, anytime we would propose legislation, we worked on this one bill called Loan Shark Prevention Act. It was to try to cap interest rates on payday loans, really terrible stuff. Very popular in red districts, purple districts, everywhere. But we couldn't get a lot of these corporate Democrats to back it because it wasn't even someone was telling them no. They were just thinking, like, which donors am I going to piss off, right? It shapes what's possible in D.C. And that's the terrible, terrible effect of having all these corporations just continue to buy out our politicians. And so that is what I want to go in there and completely break. And yeah, then I'd love to move towards a place where no one has to put in any amount of money to win these races. We just have a fair playing field for all.
Let's talk a little bit about Hasan Piker. You just mentioned this. You rallied with him. What was that, last week, right? A few days ago. We had him on the show. I think he's a fascinating guy. Had a great conversation. We were talking more about sort of like the male loneliness epidemic, so it wasn't as controversial as some of the other things he said. A San Francisco supervisor introduced a resolution calling on you to publicly acknowledge Hamas to be a genocidal terrorist organization, end quote, and distance yourself from Piker, who, again, is, very sort of anti-Israel, has been, very outspoken about what's going on in Gaza, et cetera. You chose to share stage with him anyway. I have no problem with that at all. I think progressives and I think Democrats should do a much better job talking to basically anybody. But defend your decision to rally with Piker for people out there who think that Democrats shouldn't associate themselves with, quote unquote extremists in their own party.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time that this San Francisco supervisor put out that resolution, the Republicans in Congress are putting out a very similar resolution asking for the same thing, which, I frankly think Democrats should be spending more time fighting Trump rather than just trying to fight Hasan Piker, which has become their new focus. But look, Hasan is somebody who has been streaming like 10 hours a day for almost a decade, I think over a decade now.
Yeah.
And in that time, yeah, he said some objectionable things, but the vast majority, if you listen to him, the vast majority of what he talks about is strongly pro-worker, strongly anti-racist, strongly like anti-Asian hate. It's for, creating a society that works for working people and not just for the oligarchs. And I think we have to get past this whole era of politics where we judge people by the worst things they may have said years ago.
Yes,
I think that was devastating for Democrats in 2018 and 2020 and 2024. And it's crazy to me that all that got, sort of blamed on progressives. And yet now we're seeing this third way, centrist think tank trying to wage a cancel culture war against one of the most popular media people in the country. I mean, Hasan is talking to millions of young people every single day. The voters, as Democrats claim they want to win back, and yet you're not going to engage with the person talking to those people. And and these folks who tune into Hasan's stream, they are exactly the people we need to talk to because they're the people who otherwise would either be completely nihilistic, wouldn't vote at all, or would have gone to Donald Trump. They're the folks that are going over to the right. So I think he's doing a service right now, bringing those people back into the fold and inspiring them.
No, I mean, look, the litmus test on the left, it's one of my least favorite things about being a Democrat. We were talking on the show the other day. My producer Mickey was saying, like, how come, why can't the left have its own Joe Rogan? And my response was like, well, look at what happened to Piker, right? This guy is probably the closest thing the left has to a Joe Rogan in terms of influence and reach, and the Democrats are now trying to shut him down. To your point, because of they were able to cherry pick some things he said over hundreds and hundreds of hours of being on camera every day, right? Anyway, yes, we're in agreement on this, and I think that more Democrats should follow your lead. Since we're talking a little bit about Israel, I don't want to talk much about it, but you are running for Congress. Where do you stand on U.S. military aid to Israel? Would you vote against it? Specifically, would you vote against the Iron Dome?
So Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza right now, right? And that term has real meaning, which, we should not send any aid, military or otherwise, to Israel because that's against our own laws. It's also against international law. And we should be going beyond that because a genocide means that, we have a responsibility to do what we can to stop the genocide. So I've called for us exploring sanctions to try to put pressure on Israel to stop this genocide. We have to end it. And, this has been a place where I've been clear on this from day one in the campaign. I've managed to move both my opponents by simply talking about me. Senator Wiener has been a longtime opponent of the Palestinian rights movement in California. He's authored a lot of the key legislation that equates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism in our K through 12 system. He's gotten multiple people fired for criticizing Israel. He got the president of Sonoma State University fired for doing that. He's been an opponent of this for a long time. But because this is an issue where the people have moved so dramatically, even he is now saying he no longer supports offensive weapons. He hasn't said he won't support, stopping defensive weapons.
Really? Okay. So
But
he's trying to
move his way. And look, I'm glad. Like, this is one of the great things about having competitive races and competitive primaries is you get to actually move people. But I don't trust him on the issue, is to say the least, given his entire history on it. But yeah, I see this as a clear moral red line. We should not be funding genocides anywhere. And by the way, this extends for me to other genocides that we're funding by proxy as well. Right now, there's a genocide in Sudan that we're funding by proxy through the UAE. I don't think we should be doing that either, right? This is a morally consistent position.
So, I mean, I guess that probably answers my next question. But what I was going to ask you is San Francisco does have a significant Jewish community. Pelosi did, she had deep relationships within that community. Do you worry about this position sort of affecting your coalition math?
No, I don't. And it's because I do make a very clear distinction that my position is about the nation state of Israel. It is not about Jewish people. It is about making sure everybody can live in peace and without threats of violence, and that no one should be funding genocide. And most of my Jewish constituents that I've talked to honestly support this position. They don't want America to be sending funds towards what's going on in Palestine, and people are pretty clear about that. At the same time, I've also been clear about calling out anti-Semitism when we see it at home, and I actually think it's like a really dangerous thing that groups like the ADL and some of the pro-Israel lobby folks have been doing of trying to equate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, because I actually think that makes it worse. That makes it more dangerous for Jewish people living here at home.
It absolutely does. If everything's anti-Semitism, then nothing's anti-Semitism. I've been saying this forever. And yes, criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu and his completely insane government does not make you an anti-Semite. I'm sorry. I get this all the time in my emails, and it just infuriates me. It's just it's just an unfair characterization. Saikat, I know we got to let you go soon. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just want to say, I was growing up as a brown kid in Texas after 9/11, right? And and I'm not Muslim myself, but a lot of Texans didn't necessarily make that distinction.
Didn't matter.
And it sucks to be targeted for being part of some group because of stuff that's going on abroad, because of America's foreign policy. So I feel this very personally, and and it's not just something I'm saying. I do really feel for my Jewish constituents who are feeling anti-Semitism right now. But it's just, we have to separate the two. We should just have a general rule here of we don't attack people based on what group they are, but we are okay with criticizing our other nation states, changing what our foreign policy is. And that is going to be my role as a congressperson. My influence will be on where our military dollars go.
Yeah, and Israel gets its money from us. So it's an extremely relevant and fair question for people who are working in Congress. Just as far as your policy platform and sort of governing vision go, I saw that some campaign ads of yours, you've pushed for things like a $300 monthly child stipend, housing affordability, obviously Medicare for all. These are sort of national issues. I guess you could argue housing is certainly a local issue in California. What's your specific agenda for San Francisco and the 11th District? Obviously, again, if you're not from San Francisco, great city. It's had a lot of problems lately, crime, homelessness, public disorder, obviously a massive affordability problem. What specifically will you do for the residents of that great city if you're elected?
These, to me, are entirely local issues. I mean, the biggest problem in San Francisco is a cost of living crisis. Sure. But it's a problem that you're seeing all over the country. We just face it hardest here. I don't believe the cost of living crisis is something we're going to be able to solve as a city alone. We have to fix this at a national level. I mean, when I talk about Medicare for all, part of that is to make sure that people aren't spending their, half their paycheck on health insurance. But even if you look at the San Francisco city budget, about the largest driver of employee costs is healthcare benefits. So the only thing the city can do as a result of that is cut other services, cut other measures, right? So we have to solve healthcare at a national level. That means Medicare for all. I talk about public power in San Francisco. We need to kick PG&E out because there's other cities in California that have public power, and they pay about 40% less than we do on their utility bills. And this is oddly a federal issue because San Francisco actually it was a federal law that allowed us to purchase a dam to get a bunch of power that we get into the city. It's called the Raker Act in 1913. So as a congressperson, I'm going to enforce the Raker Act to push PG&E out and move to public power in San Francisco and cut our utility bills. But same thing. I mean, if you look at universal child care, tuition-free public colleges and trade schools, trying to move, building actual affordable housing and social housing to get the cost of housing down, kicking private equity and hedge funds out of our housing market. These are all hyper-local issues because the cost of living crisis is a hyper-local issue, and we can't solve it unless we solve these issues at a federal level.
Are you on board with the so-called abundance movement on the left?
I'm not on board with the movement. No, I mean, I'm somebody who believes when it comes to housing, we do have to cut red tape and make it easier to construct housing. That's part of it, but it is not nearly sufficient. That has been sort of the line that the abundance movement and people like State Senator Wiener have really been using. If we just made it easy enough to build, then the private markets would fix this problem for us. And that's not true. If you look in San Francisco, there's about 70,000 units of housing that have already been permitted to be built that are not being built because financing's not there. Cost of construction is too high. And so that's why at a federal level, what I call for is a new federal financing bank. It's really bringing back the Reconstruction Finance Corporation that I talked about earlier from the New Deal World War II era. And that could actually provide low-cost financing to build out affordable housing. It could even do things like spin off public developers to build out this housing directly and even stockpile lumber and steel to control costs of the housing market. It's a much more proactive approach by the government to actually make sure really affordable housing gets built. To do that, we have to also repeal the Faircloth Amendment, which is a law that exists that prevents us from building any new social housing in the country. And we also have to have way more support against displacement. So I call for doubling rental vouchers, having federal support for tenants unions to make sure people can stay in the homes they're in. And we have to actually go after capital. So that's why I talk about preventing private equity and hedge funds from buying up single-family homes. But the problem is right now, of all the 4 ideas I put out there, cutting red tape, building out social housing, only one of those ideas is favorable to the real estate lobby, and that's the cutting red tape part. And that's why that's the one that gets all the attention. So, I'm going to be the candidate in this race who doesn't take any real estate lobby money. We have to completely break the stranglehold of real estate lobby money in D.C., and that's going to mean changing Democratic Party leadership. It's going to mean primarying a bunch of corporate Democrats, because the solutions we have right now are just not even at the scale of what we need to do to solve the housing crisis in San Francisco.
I think that's fair. Saikat, my final question to you before I let you go. I'm thinking about my aunt, who's lifetime resident of San Francisco. Probably, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she probably considers herself sort of an establishment Democrat. Probably voted for Pelosi every election. What's your sort of elevator pitch to my aunt for why she should pull the lever for you in a couple weeks in the primary?
How old's your aunt? Out of curiosity.
That's probably good information to have, right? She's a boomer. She would be in her 70s.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell your aunt, because I've done so many events in rooms full of people exactly like your aunt, older folks in San Francisco who've been here for a long time, who've loved
the city.
Love the city, of course, but also love Nancy Pelosi, love the Democratic Party, have been mainline Democratic voters. But even people like your aunt, I'd tell her, look, think of your children, right? Think of the next generation. Look at what the city is turning into, and the city is turning into this place that only the wealthy can afford to live in, right? Where the people who actually run this city, the people who are working in our cafes, the people who are, the nurses in our hospitals, they're getting driven out, and we have to completely change the system to make it right. So to make it so that your kids can afford to live here. And I'll say, when I give the pitch of the bigger ideas to those rooms and I see those rooms coming on board, that's what inspires me. That's why I think that this kind of change is possible right now, because it is, people like your aunt, I think 2 years ago would not be open to this message, but right now they are, because they see Donald Trump coming back and it's no longer an aberration. Clearly something is really wrong. Right. What the Democratic establishment is doing is not working, and we need something new. And so what I'm trying to pitch here is, a real answer for what do we do in this moment to completely turn the system around and do what, FDR did during the New Deal, do what we know we can do. We have a history of being able to change our system when we've needed to do it. So not talking about anything all that radical, but it's possible to do right now.
Well, well said. Saikat Chakrabarti, everybody, candidate for Congress in CA 11. Primaries on June 2nd. Saikat, just tell people where they can find you if they want to look into your platform a little more.
Yeah, so you could go online, go to saikat.us, and I do want to say we've been running a massive grassroots operation. We've had over 3,000 people sign up to volunteer. We've knocked nearly 400,000 doors in the city. Right now we're in the middle of trying to get the vote out. So if you live in San Francisco or the Bay Area, please consider going to the website and sign up to volunteer. And if you live outside, you can phone bank for us. But we're going to get it done, and I'd love to get your support.
It's going to be a fascinating statewide race. I mean, there's a lot of great races going on in California right now. This is one of them. Saikat Chakrabarti, thank you again for your time, man. Most appreciative, and good luck to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.